Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Dr. Feinerman, and perhaps you know about me or have attended other webinars or know about me through PhD. But today we're going to be speaking on connecting your values with your goals to create success. Perhaps you have some background knowledge in this, but I wanted to start too by just sharing a bit about me in case you're not familiar with who I am. My background is in psychology, and I worked for a long time in clinics and hospitals. And then after that, I also did trainings at Harvard and Yale in mind-body medicine. So my passion is really about helping people understand holistic ways to view their journeys so that they can have sustainable success. So let's start today by doing a fun poll. So you'll probably see on your monitor somewhere there that you can enter your answer. So this one is, I want you to take a guess at who you think said this quote. So obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, go through it, or work around it. So you'll see there that you have some options about who you could pick, who you think said this. And the reason that I chose this in particular is because I want us to talk a little bit today before we really dive into more specifics about goals and values, is this idea of a growth mindset. So you'll see this other quote beside it that says, when you approach life with a growth mindset, you understand abilities can be developed. So what we know from research actually is that when we have a growth mindset, we really have a greater chance of being successful. So here's a little bit about what we will cover today. We'll review how when we align with our goals and values, we have a greater chance for success. We'll go over, as I just mentioned, the growth mindset and also help you identify your own values so you can figure out how to motivate yourself towards your goals. And then we'll end by going over a really specific 5-step process of turning your intention and values into reality. So I hope for you to take away today a lot of good information about just the specifics of how to use this idea. So let's kind of review growth mindset. Maybe you're familiar with it, maybe you're not, but research from Stanford, Yale, Harvard, all kinds of places, as well as out of psychology, suggests that the growth mindset really bridges this idea of self-concepts, which is what a mindset is, and also this idea about how we motivate ourselves, our habits and behaviors. So this is important because when we're talking about change, is what you're probably trying to do in your own individual lives by joining PhD and setting yourself on a track for health and wellness. We really are wanting to look at our habits and behaviors, and we're really wanting to get underneath what guides the behaviors that we've had up until this point that's either causing us to work in alignment with our values and our goals or not. Like, why are we self-sabotaging? What's getting in the way? And sometimes looking at these ideas of self-conceptions or mindsets is really important. Now, I'm going to go into more depth of why growth mindset in particular is important and what the research suggests about that, as well as how that looks in our daily life, right? Sometimes having specific examples actually helps us understand, okay, do I have a growth mindset or not? So I'm going to look at the poll real quick and see what you guys said. It looks like it's still maybe going, so I'm going to give it another minute. Or if nobody answered, that's okay too. Looks like, it doesn't look like there were any answers. So just so you know, it's Michael Jordan. I feel that this quote is really powerful when we think about growth mindset, because obstacles is something that we'll review can get in the way of us having an ability to be successful. So I like always putting in a little bit of a cartoon into my presentation. So this one, you see someone that's moving in a valued direction, but you see behind them, they have self-doubt, anxiety, memories. So this is why it's important to think about our values in alignment with our goals, because sometimes we have every intention to be able to move in the value direction that we want, right? Health, wellness, getting to a peak state in our life. But if we have all these other things we're pulling with us, these self-conceptions that we've talked about, then those end up getting in the way, right? Like we have these underlying ideas about who we are. So let's go over the growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So when we have a growth mindset, what we're really saying is that we're okay with meeting challenges. And this is really important too, because, think for yourself even, are there times in my life or examples that I've had where it didn't feel safe to fail? Failure wasn't an option. And the reason why that's important to just get a hold of what that story is for you is because sometimes perfectionism is what's driving that, right? Like I have to do everything perfectly. And if that's what's underneath that idea of you can't fail, then what's going to happen is all along the way, if there are moments where you're stumbling or hitting obstacles, you might feel less motivated or get scared or step back or feel like maybe this isn't the right decision for you, when really instead there could be a different mindset of I'm going to dig in. So let's go over what some of those are. So a fixed mindset is that you believe you have the skills that you have and that you can't add to them. So that would look something like you believe that the way you've lived your life or the weight that you've been at or the things that you've been facing are the only way that you're going to be, instead of thinking that throughout your life you can change and develop. And we know actually through neuroplasticity and neurogenesis that our brains can change our whole entire life, which means that we can really continue to grow and change. So it's not just a value, but it's a fact of science, which is really great. Okay, another one. If we're focused on a fixed mindset, it means that we have to do everything well. We're afraid of like not being perfect at what we do. That can really get in the way of being able to learn new things. So with everything, it's this idea from Eastern traditions of what they call the beginner's mind. It's this ability to be comfortable in discomfort, to try new things and not judge ourselves for them, but instead get curious. So another example of how this could show up for you is you kind of back away from challenges. So if you have a fixed mindset, you're going to not want to challenge yourself or get out of your comfort zone. But if we have a growth mindset, then what we really realize is that challenge is an opportunity to learn, and that the process is really what we want to focus on. So just ask yourself as we're going through these, do any of these sound like me? And which one? Am I falling into a growth mindset or am I finding myself in a fixed mindset? And so the last one I want to mention is a fixed mindset is I compete with others. Meaning I'm always competing with other people. I'm judging myself and comparing myself to the standards of other people. Now, this could be people in media. It could be people in your family. It could be friends. It could be people on Instagram. Are you constantly comparing yourself to other people as a way of judging, are you good or good enough? So that's the fixed mindset. The growth mindset was you only compete with yourself, meaning you want to be a better version of yourself each day. Now, that's really important too, because what we know from psychology and also from neuroscience is that when we get into competing with other people, we actually create certain neurochemicals in our brain that create a stress response in our body. And over time, that actually can get in the way of us being successful with our goals, our weight loss, and even impact our relationships. So just kind of, as we went through those, I hope you're kind of checking for yourself, which one am I falling into? Okay, so sorry this type looks a little bit small on my screen. I hope that you guys can read it on yours, but we're going to go through some ways to identify values. So maybe you have some vague idea about what your values are, but maybe you've never specifically identified them. So here are 5 steps for you to do that. So to identify your primary values, just take a piece of paper and write them down, right? So values could be connection, it could be freedom, it could be well-being, it could be all kinds of things. So kind of get clear with yourself, right? Because we don't necessarily ever get so clear with ourselves that we have these like one words for what our values are. Then as you do that, ask yourself, okay, how do these values show up in my life? And maybe you have a value and you realize, oh, it's not really showing up in my life, right? Like maybe one of your values is time with family or connection, but you realize you're so busy working or doing other things that you're not making space for that. That's actually really important because through my work with people individually throughout my life and my career, I've seen that connection is one of the best things that we can do for our overall well-being, which helps support all of our goals. Studies out of Harvard have actually shown that loneliness, chronic loneliness, is the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So connection as a value actually has all of these other implements and implications to it if we're not actually meeting it. So first step, identify your primary values. Okay. Second, determine tangible definitions of your values. So this is important, again, because sometimes we have values maybe that are passed down from our friends or families or loved ones, and some of those match with us and some of those don't, or even some of like the definitions of values do, right? So someone might have the value of being humble, but they might perceive being humble as negative self-talk. So what they might actually be doing is they have this value that, oh, I grew up with the value of being humble. And so somewhere along the lines, they interpreted that to mean I should be like mean to myself. I should say things about myself like, you're not that great, you're not that good, like other people are better, don't think so high of yourself. And what they've actually done is internalized a critical voice. Now, why this is important is because the value is good. The value of humility is a great value, but the way that it's showing up in their life is actually getting in the way of them being able to achieve their goal. Because what we know, again, from research is if we have a lot of internal critical thoughts and dialogue, that is actually going to get in the way and will lead to self-sabotaging behaviors. It can lead to anxiety, depression, can lead to all kinds of things that will get in the way. So this idea of not just knowing the values, but defining them for yourself. What does this mean for me? How does it show up is really, really important. The other thing is it's specific, right? The value of humility may have a general definition that we can find in the dictionary, but what it looks like in our daily lives might also be specific to who you are as a person. Okay, so after we do step 2, step 3 is define your values, define your goals based on your values. Okay, so this one is really important, and I'm going to give some examples. So maybe you have a goal of freedom in your life, right? Which is also kind of a value. Like I want to be able to do what I want. I want to travel. I want to whatever. So maybe though, in your mind, you have this goal of freedom. And so let's just say that what you did is you think I'm going to get a job that pays a lot of money. When I have a lot of money, I'll have a lot of freedom, right? So far we're like kind of tracking, right? There's the goal, there's the value. But what happens then, right, is you get this job where you have a lot of money, but you're working really hard and now you have no free time. So now you have the money that you thought would get you the freedom, but you're actually stuck. Now, why this is important, I'm going to give one more goal and then I'll explain why it's important. Sorry, I wanted to give you another one just so you have some context. So let's say another value is connection, but you also have this idea of you wanting to like live in a big house so that you can have everyone over and be in this big house with you, right? So, but let's say you buy a big house and for the purpose of everyone's going to come visit me, but you've picked a place that's way far away, so no one can get there easily. So now you're in this big house with the idea of I have all this space so people will visit me so I can have connection, which is my value, but no one's coming to visit you. So now you're actually lonely. Okay, so why this is important is because sometimes our goals, even though we think are aligned with our values, they're really not. And what this does is actually creates dissonance in the brain, cognitive dissonance. So what that means is we don't understand why the goal that we have is not aligned with the actions we're taking. And it's because, just like I gave these 2 other examples, is that it breaks down somewhere in the pattern, right? The thing that we thought was going to get us to where we wanted to be is like the ladder that's against the wrong wall. So we really do need to kind of break apart and kind of dissect the goals and really ask ourselves, is this really going to take me to the place I want to go? So that's the first 3 steps, right? And why it's so important. The other step, the 4th step, is that I want you to actually think about and identify what are the obstacles that could get in the way of your goal. So what we know from research and science is actually that when we sit down to have a goal and we equally take the time to write out what's going to get in the way, we have a greater likelihood of success. Part of the reason for that is because instead of being blindsided by the fact that we're going to have challenges, we actually are ready for it. We're prepared for it. We're expecting it. And so instead of something coming up that's a challenge, like let's say for your journey with PhD, you go to a family event, let's say, and you know, like, okay, it might be hard, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'll just stay on my plan. And then you kind of struggle. Instead of already thinking ahead of time, oh, this could be like a black hole for me, being with family and the influence of other people. Once you've already identified the obstacle ahead of time, you can also come up with a plan that will help you. So the identifying the obstacle is a big part of actually achieving the goal. So maybe you're new to the journey, maybe you're still on it, but doing this over time and continually rechecking, like what are the obstacles or challenges I'm facing now? Or what are the ones that I see ahead with this new goal I have? And really planning for those can actually help you be more successful. It's not negative thinking, it's planning. Okay. And then the last is determine action steps needed to reach your goal. So I'm sure you guys all do that already with your PhD coaches, but do it for yourself too in micro ways, like on a daily basis. How am I showing up for my goal? What are small things I can do on a regular basis that help align my values and my goals? Now, this is really important too, because we know from research out of Stanford and other places that the way that new habits are formed are not these giant leaps. They're every little decision we're making throughout our day of how am I showing up for myself? How am I staying aligned with my goals? We can't just make the decision once. And that's something else that I wanted to mention today on the webinar that I want to encourage everyone is when we make big life changes, if it's around our food or our health habits or relational or work, it's not a one-time thing. And we all would love that, right? Like we do it once and then it's done. But the truth is it's a practice. And so we have to get comfortable with the fact that it's going to be a journey, that it's going to mean that every day we're doing it. And that's not to be depressing or discouraging or mean it's going to have a lot of work to do it. Just think, okay, in this moment, how can I show up for myself? And that's actually going to create the greatest levels of success when you do it that way. Okay, so just as a review, how to set achievable goals. So we have reflection, focus, plan, get support, and revisit. So these kinds of summarize a lot of the things we've already covered today, but just to start with, again, the reflect, right? So to get clear about your goals and values, you have to have a period of reflection. You got to get it focused, which is what we just talked about with defining your goals and values for yourself in your own language. You need to come up with a plan, right? Which is partly also looking at the obstacles. What's going to be ahead of me? How do I get around it? How can I set myself up for success, right? You need to ask for support. So one of the biggest things about goals and getting successful with our goals is actually finding support. You have the PhD team, but also I encourage you to find people outside of PhD that can support your goals, friends, family, loved ones, people that can be there to really encourage you when you're feeling like you're struggling. And then revisit those goals on a regular basis, maybe even daily. As we're building new neural networks in the brain, what we know from neuroscience is we have to have repetition. We have to have the ability to continue to have these new experiences. And just as a side note, what we also know about neuroplasticity in the brain is besides having those new experiences that create the new neural networks, we also have to have good self-care. So it's not a one and done kind of experience. Sleep is really where the brain is rewiring and the whole body is restructuring itself. So do these things. And as you revisit them, also remember that self-care is one of the biggest ways you can support yourself in your journey. And you can really help your body on all kinds of levels, including your metabolism, your immune system, your stress response. So it's a holistic way of revisiting how am I taking care of my goals and values on a regular basis. Okay, so one other tip I said that I would give you today is this 5-step how to do intentions into your goals and then create success. So maybe you've heard about this before, but there's something called SMART goals. So it's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time limited. That's the acronym for it. So we'll just go through these together one at a time. So what you're going to do is once you have the values you've identified that we went over before in the presentation, you're going to write down specifically what your value is aligned with your goal. So another example could be maybe your value is family. And so maybe your goal is to get really healthy so that you can enjoy more time, more quality time with family or do activities with them, right? So this is really great. That's a goal that's aligned with your value. The other piece of it is write down as much detail as possible. And I would encourage you to include all of your senses. There's a lot of neuroscience around how powerful it is with visualizations when we can include all the senses, meaning, okay, if I were to get this goal where I want to be family time is important to me or family, and then the goal is to get to a healthy weight so that I can enjoy my family time, this is what it's going to look like when I get there. So write one sentence with what would I see? What would I smell? What would I hear? What would I taste? What would I feel? What would it create an actual picture for yourself of what it's actually going to be like specifically when you reach this goal? That makes it more real for us. The unconscious brain works through images. So if you can really make the image vivid of what this goal will be like and what it will be like for you to achieve it, it will actually be more motivating and more powerful for you. Okay, so the second thing of the SMART goal is measurable. So obviously, if you're in this program, you know there's lots of ways they're measuring your success, right? But I want you to also think about ways besides just the weight on the scale that you can measure your daily success, meaning, am I getting enough sleep? Am I showing up for myself? Am I doing self-care? Am I managing my stress levels? So yes, have the identifiable, measurable things that you're doing with PhD, but create some for yourself too that are about long-term, overall, holistic ways that you want to improve your well-being. That can actually be really helpful too, because what we do when we celebrate even the small wins is we create dopamine in the brain, which is a neurochemical that not only is about reward and feeling good, but it's also about motivation and focus. So if we can give ourselves these little dopamine hits of rewarding behavior where we're showing up for ourselves, even if it seems small, right? Like I did my affirmations today, but doing that will actually help you feel like, okay, I'm identifying measurable targets and I'm tracking it, and that's going to build on itself. It's going to feel really good when you keep showing up for yourself, even in small ways on a regular basis. Okay, attainable. So this is really important. What we know from research out of Stanford is that the smaller the goal can be to start with, the better. And the reason why is because when we have this goal of I'm going to run a marathon, but we've never run a day in our life, that's really overwhelming usually. And it's also, you don't go from not running at all to running a marathon. You have to take it in little chunks. And this is what they call stacking as well. And so this idea is that you want to pick small, little, micro new habits that support your overall goals long term, right? And so when you do that, then it becomes more attainable. You're not thinking, oh, I have to make this huge leap to be where I'm going to be at the end of the journey. You're just looking at the next step. And that can also be really encouraging for us and help us not get overwhelmed. So make sure that you're creating attainable goals even in the moment of this week, this day, and then next week you make new goals based on where you're at that following week. Okay. The next one is realistic. Acknowledge what requires you to meet this goal. So this, in a different way, is the same idea of acknowledging the obstacles you might face. So just, take a few moments to be realistic with yourself. Here's where I'm going to struggle. Here, maybe it's emotional eating, or maybe it's when, you're with family or friends, or maybe you've used food to celebrate. And so now you're going to have to find new ways to celebrate success. Or, maybe when you were young, when you did something good, you got a cookie. And so now you have this unconscious pattern around when a behavior is rewarded, meaning maybe you get to a target in PhD, and then you have this old pattern of when I get to a target or I've done something good, the reward is we get to go out and have a treat. So if that's the old pattern that's in your head, that value and idea about being treated with food as a reward is actually going to get in the way of your goal, right? So spend some time getting realistic with yourself and acknowledging what is required of me. And maybe that's going to be, I need to change some of my ideas and values around habits and behaviors I've had in the past and come up with new ones. So that's really important. And then time limited, specific timelines. So this is really important. People in business do this. People that are training for sports do this. Everyone does it in their own way if they have a goal, which means we don't just say, okay, here's my goals, here's my values, and I'm going to just, not really think about it until I have my weekly meeting with PhD, or if you're in maintenance, when I have my once a month or once every in a while. I want you to really kind of get clear with yourself. Okay, if I have this goal for myself, I'm also going to put in periods of time, either in my week or in my month, where I'm checking in with myself. And I would encourage you not just to do this around your actual weight journey, if that's the one that you're on, but also goals around your self-care that are time limited, meaning you're specifically checking in around deadlines of how well have I done with myself in creating boundaries? How well have I done with myself about making new space for self-care or creativity or relaxation? And when you actually put check-ins in your calendar about checking in with yourself, like an appointment you would make if you had a work meeting you couldn't miss, then you're more likely to actually show up for yourself. And the goal here is really to create a sustainable model for your well-being. And so it is going to require that you kind of look at it with this specificity, as you would anything else. Okay, so that's the SMART goals. Okay, so just in the last couple of minutes, 5 minutes we have, I'm going to see if there's any questions. I want to thank you so much for showing up today. This webinar eventually I think will be in the research corner if you want to revisit it. Also, I have my information on here if you ever wanted to do an elevated coaching session with me, I'd be honored to work with you more specifically on how these things or other things show up in your life. And if there are questions we can't get to today, feel free to email the PhD team and they'll make sure I get those. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions or follow up on that.